Come, little lamb, to the slaughter with you.
Gamer Braves.
What's up guys, it's Wandermill from Game Braves. Now, admittedly, there has been some trepidation around Final Fantasy XVI. A lot of random nerds out there believe that Final Fantasy XVI for some reason isn't a true Final Fantasy game. Now, I may or may not have spent the past week just putting my nose to the grindstone and playing this game, and I have the facts for you. This issue always boils down to what actually makes a Final Fantasy game. Despite people being so defensive over what is or isn't a Final Fantasy game, the series itself has actually changed quite a bit. Look at the original graphics of Final Fantasy I and compare them to something like 16 or even 7 Remake. They do not look like the same game, and it's in that same spirit that 16 excels so much. Mainline Final Fantasy games are a huge part of Square Enix catalog, and you can tell that Naoki Lalafell Yoshida knew the assignment when going in with Final Fantasy XVI. Arguably, its most contentious change is the combat system, which ditches any attempt to be turn-based in favor of going full-on action game with it. You don't bring a man like Devil May Cry's Ryota Suzuki onto a project and don't expect some smoke and sick style. Admittedly, it's not a one-to-one clone of a Devil May Cry game, but you can definitely see how injecting expertise in action games into this title works out, because controlling Clive is a lot of fun. It ditches a lot of the JRPG tropes like having a party and having to take care of that party in favor of there just being Clive. You still of course will have side characters running around doing stuff for you, but you do not get any say in what they do. They don't have specific roles or functions. Instead, all there is Clive and occasionally Torgal, who is less of a party member and more of an extension of your moveset, having abilities like a quick heal and a launcher to throw you up in the air. I've talked about this before, but good god, they knew what needed to be in this game to make it a good action one. You can do all sorts of things like crazy jump cancels and using Eikon skills to keep people in the air for longer. Heck, you know it's a Devil May Cry game when you can throw people up in the air and then keep them suspended by firing your magic like a gun. That being said, as a Devil May Cry nutter, my least favorite part of it is how they incorporate the Eikon skills. Clive has a bunch of moves that are tied to various icons in the game that he can encounter, and they literally work like Devil May Cry styles. Each icon has a style action which can be used whenever, but the other abilities are tied to cooldowns. I'm not a particularly big fan of cooldowns just because I have my own hang-ups that make me feel like I'm wasting them if I don't use them at the right time. Once you get far enough into the game, you'll start realizing which ones are good for staggering enemies versus which ones are good for doing damage, in which case you suddenly realize that you've invented a rotation, like a critically acclaimed MMORPG with a free trial up to level 50 and no restrictions on playtime, and including the award-winning Heavensward expansion. Yoshida! That being said, I'm kind of glad that they don't go full-on Devil May Cry with it. Not unlike fighting games, character action games are hard to sell to the general audience because the modus operandi is, hey, if you destroy your hands learning to do these highly specific, high execution moves, you'll have a lot of fun. To which most people say, no, I'm going to go play this game casually, and be like, well, that's on you, look at me with my triple S rank, and then they end up not liking the game and not liking you for forcing them to try and play better. Combine this with Creative Business Unit Tree's expertise in making MMOs, and you have a very refreshing experience, because while Clive controls like an action game character, the bosses are designed like MMO encounters. They'll do things like patterns on the ground that you have to avoid, and like I said, using your cooldowns is not unlike using rotations in an MMO. It's a very unique experience, and I think FF16 is for the better for it. I much prefer it like this than as just another one of the hack and slash action RPGs that don't quite hit the mark every time. And it's all a result of the team playing to the strengths that they have. This extends into the game's other portion, which is the Eikon Battles. If you've seen any of the trailers, these are the big tentpole events where Clive turns into Ifrit and fights another Eikon. I don't know if my voice is conveying just how rad these things are. I can't go into detail because of spoilers obviously, but every single one of these fights has been incredibly cool and left me thinking, oh my god, this is the hypest thing I've ever seen. They're all designed around whichever Eikon you're fighting, which makes no two fights the same. Sure, Ifrit's moveset will be similar in the different fights, but he's tuned to the kind of encounter. For example, facing off against Garuda is nothing like facing off against Titan. It's this kind of love and attention to detail that makes Final Fantasy XVI such a special game. This is really where you get to the core ethos of Final Fantasy XVI, which is that it is a blockbuster. It is designed to be exciting and engaging every chance you get, whether you're just fighting goblins in the middle of a swamp or engaged in the sickest kaiju battle that makes you wish that Gridman was an icon. It's not like this is a case of great gameplay and mediocre story either. We obviously can't talk too much about the story because, again, spoilers, but you can very clearly tell that Creative Business Unit 3 wanted the story to be the centerpiece of this game. A lot of time and polish went into making sure that enjoying this story was an uninterruptible experience. You have things like the gameplay, where there's a very forgiving checkpoint restart if you die, just fills up all your potions and health regardless of what you were at the checkpoint. And there's even accessories that let you do things like automatically dodge or automatically heal, kind of like the auto chips in Nier Automata. All so that you sit down and you enjoy this story without having to worry about grinding an entire dungeon again. It helps that the story itself is actually good. Clive is an interesting character, and I'm glad we're free of any kind of worry that he was just going to be a character chasing after popular protagonists like Cloud or, I don't know, Squall or something. I do like the return to the medieval fantasy kind of setting. As much as some people think the whole techno fantasy is core Final Fantasy identity, I do like it when we just go back to normal swords and sorcery stuff. Again, I can't go into too much specifics, but there are some moments in here that legitimately have my mouth like just wide open going, oh my god, I can't believe that happened. And I'm a pretty cynical dude, so you know, it's not that often that I find myself surprised by these kinds of things. At the end of the day, I understand the worries about, is Final Fantasy XVI going to be a real Final Fantasy game? But I don't think you have to worry about that anymore. Just like every other Final Fantasy game, it's as much a story about sticking with your comrades as it is about saving the world from a threat that works as an allegory for the real world. Sure, it's missing a lot of typical Final Fantasy things. While there is a gear system, it's pretty much just, is your sword doing enough damage, and not any kind of build requirement like you'd get in something like Final Fantasy VII with the materia system. But that's all because it knows what it wants to be, and it's not afraid of being held back by other people's perceptions of what a Final Fantasy needs to be. And I think there's some commendation to be had there. With all the time I've spent playing Final Fantasy XVI, it is such an overwhelmingly complete package that it feels weird to bring any of it up like it's an actual major flaw in the game. At the end of the day, when you pick up Final Fantasy XVI, you're picking up a blockbuster fantasy title with a really solid gameplay loop. I can't think of anything else that better symbolizes the pedigree of the Final Fantasy brand. Final Fantasy XVI gets a 9 out of 10 from us. If you've any love for the Final Fantasy series, I highly implore checking it out. Like I said, I can't tell you the specifics of the story, and that's a good thing because it's something you really want to experience for yourself. If you're an action game fan, the combination of MMO enemy design and action game combat works really well to give you an experience that you don't get in many other games. Seriously, this is easily one of my top games this year, and it's available exclusively on the PS5. Thanks to our friends at PlayStation and Square Enix for letting us check out this game early. Seriously, just go try it out for yourself and gaze upon the beauty that is Benedicta Harmon. This has been Watermelon from Game Braves. Take care, guys.
Thank you so much for watching our videos. Don't forget to give us a subscribe if you'd like to see more, and like so we know what kind of content you want to see. Got suggestions for new content? Let us know in the comments below too. Thank you so much again for watching. Take care, dudes.